Okay, here we are. I'm trying to use my recording mic for this, so hopefully the audio will be a little bit better. I'm going to step away for just a minute. Okay, here we are. I'm trying to use my recording mic for this, so hopefully the audio will be a little bit better. Hey, how's it going? I'm going to step away for just a minute. Good to see you. Okay, here we are. I'm trying to use my mic for this, so hopefully the audio will be a little bit better. How you been holding up? Let's see, still getting set up here. Yeah, I think the audio sounds better. Let me know if it's not as good as last time, or if it's still needs some improvement. So yeah, I thought we'd just kind of hang out today. Okay. All right. Audio's good? Okay, great. Thanks. Yeah, so I thought we'd just hang out today and yeah, just talk about Legions Imperialis. And I don't really have, I guess I have kind of a topic of discussion. I was thinking about scatter terrain the other day, and I was kind of curious if anybody had any thoughts about that, if you use any like minefields and barbed wire and stuff like that in your games. Um, I used to when I first started playing, but I don't do so much anymore. Um, I'm not quite sure why. I think it was just an extra step during terrain, which just made the game take a little bit longer to get going. But I do think it added something to the game where you had to consider the terrain that you were moving over a little bit more carefully. But I think it also ended up being a bit, started being a bit dominant of the game. And you had to be careful not to make the effects of the scatter terrain too powerful. Otherwise, it really became more of a nuisance than actually, making the game more interesting and fun. So that's something I've kind of been thinking about. There's a lot of capabilities, like in real world militaries, for dealing with scatter terrain, right? Um, that we don't necessarily have in Legions Imperialis, like bridge layers, and you use you use tank traps sometimes. Yeah, I think that's a good one. I mean, that would be something that I made little Czech hedgehogs. I found a laser cut template online, and I used that, and they came out pretty well. They were a little fragile, but they looked pretty good, and they looked pretty in scale. And I think what we did was we said they were impassable to vehicles, but walkers and infantry could move through them. I think we said walkers were, treated them as difficult terrain. And I think that worked well, but I also think it kind of opens it up to some manipulation. I think anytime you add impassable terrain, it starts being easy to manipulate and maybe not so much fun. So it's like I was saying before, I think it's a tough balancing act. How did you handle it, Mackie? Did you treat them as impassable or just difficult or what? Because I think we did barbed wire the same way, like it was impassable to infantry, and then difficult for walkers and cavalry. And again, I think the idea is sound there, but I think we ran into some issues with people. They would like screen the front of a building, impassable for vehicles. Yeah, yeah. I don't know. Did you have any issues with that being sort of a little bit too powerful, or did that seem to work well for you? because as I was saying with the barbed wire, with the concertina wire, it was kind of, you could put it in front of a building and then the building can't be assaulted by infantry, which maybe isn't that huge of a deal. I don't know. Hey, Luna Inc. Studios. Hi from Australia. It's 3:46 a.m. Hey, well, thank you for your dedication. I appreciate you showing up to the stream. Glad to have you. Mackie Notes says it was mostly used for blocking some bridges. Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's what it would be used for in real life too, right? So I don't know. I think it's, I know I've said this already at least once, but it's a delicate balancing act, right? Um, you don't want it to become too dominant because then everybody just sits in place and shoots at each other, and that's not super interesting. But you also want to have some reason to not just like run directly at each other. You want to have some reason for maneuver and controlling different movement corridors and avenues of approach. And I think that scatter terrain can really help with that. And then there's another issue, like we used minefields. Maybe super heavies can break them like knights and titans and knights. Yeah, I think that could be a good option. I think that would make sense, and I think that would give titans and knights, some extra advantage on the table, which they certainly need. As most, yeah. So I don't know. I think they're a good addition to the game. I think more terrain is generally a better thing than less. And I know in the black books they had a lot of, at least in the first couple covering Istvan, they had a lot of really cool ideas for special terrain based on different machina. Yeah, that's right. Titans and Knights already break some of the obstacles. Yeah, totally right. So just make super heavies maybe do it. Yeah. I see what you're saying. Super heavies. I think that would be fine, or at least Titans for sure. Yeah. I agree. And so that would maybe give you, and that fits in with their role, right? They're supposed to be line breakers, and they're supposed to be able to breach and spear point assaults. So yeah, I think that would be good. Luna Inc. Studios. What are you working on at 3:46 a.m.? Are you painting Legions Imperialis miniatures? Um, we're kind of talking about scatter terrain right now. I don't know if you have any thoughts about that. Um, I think one of the things that we had troubles with for minefields was, I think we said it was dangerous terrain and it would be AP -1, but it would strike the rear arc of a vehicle that drove through it. And, I think that's good, but if you compare it to like a vehicle obstacle, like we were just discussing, that is impassable to vehicles, I'm not really sure you would take a minefield over tank traps, although the tank traps wouldn't necessarily affect infantry. So I don't know. It's kind of it's a balance, a balancing act, I guess. So I'm not sure what you would do. I mean, I guess the fact that it affects everything equally, the mines do, make them maybe a little bit more. Do you have friendly bombardment in Australia? Jim B687. I'm not sure what you're asking there. Do you have friendly bombardment in Australia? Jim B687. Luna Inc. Studio says just got back into the game since launch. Okay, so you got some stuff from it for the game when it first launched, and it's been on the back burner since then, and you're just starting out. That's good. I think the game's probably in a good place right now, and it's probably the best time to be getting into it, actually, even including the launch. So that's, I think you're coming in at the right time. We got lots of options, lots of games. Jim B687 says, I often think that it's a war zone, A10 Thunderhawk bombing sometime. A war zone in Australia? A10 Thunderhawk. Yeah, sorry, Chimpy, Chimpy 687. I'm not following you. Um, do you mean like Legions Imperialis, like close air support? I'm sorry. I feel like I'm being stupid here, but I'm just not understanding what you're saying. Um, yeah. So I just ordered my Fellblades and the Saturnine book. I didn't buy anything else. I am not sure. I might get the Falchion box as well, but I'm not super happy. I'm not super happy about the whole not having a volcano cannon. I haven't played with it yet, obviously, so maybe if you guys have played with the Falchion already, with the neutron cannon, maybe let me know what you think. But I think that 30-inch range is not what I was hoping for. Um, Luna Inc. Studios says I started with Alpha Legion and apparently with the Liber Strategia book, apparently my guys got nerfed a bit. Yes, I think that is true. I don't think you have anything to worry about though. The Alpha Legion are still the dominant Legion in the game by far. Um, their Legion rule is still very good, and um, yeah, it's just not quite as good as it was, which is really not saying much because it was outstanding. So yeah, um, I don't think you have anything to worry about. Jim B687 says you are very serious people. I'm talking about casual feeling. Yeah, I am. I guess I don't. I try to joke around sometimes, but yeah, I just that's how I am. Um, yeah. So yeah, talking about scatter terrain, I think we kind of covered that pretty well. Um, let's see. Yeah, I don't know what the game plan is going forward as far as the Legion special rules. I talked with somebody about it in the comments a few days ago. I do really think that the Legion special rules are one of the most disappointing parts of the game, and I don't know. It doesn't look like they're going to be doing additions necessarily for Legions Imperialis, so I don't know if that's ever going to get fixed, and I think it's a real shame because the whole point of the Horus Heresy is to deal with the different legions and their different characters as part of the Civil War. And the fact that you really don't get that in Legions Imperialis is, I think, a big misstep. I mean, obviously you can do it yourself. You can add your own character to your army lists and create things that way. And they're doing some with the iconic formations, although I know some people aren't super happy about the iconic formations. But I just, yeah, I know it's hard to design 20 or 18, I guess, special rules that are all equally good and that somehow match and support the theme of the Legion that they're designed for. But at the same time, I feel like that should have been one of the priorities of their design would be to try and do that. And so I don't know. I don't know if we can hope for some kind of like supplement maybe that or maybe an FAQ even that just revises them because there's so many that are just they're just not even worth talking about really. And I know some people disagree with me on that, but I I just it's such a big part of the game. You know, the character of the legions. I mean, it's that's what people want. I mean, that's why people don't like the Horse Heresy, because it's all about Space Marines, and yet, or that's what they say anyway. But the designers haven't put the effort into making the Space Marines interesting, or the individual legions interesting and distinct. Maybe that's just something they're planning on adding as we go. You know, like I said, with the iconic formations, that does help somewhat, but I don't think it's enough. Luna Inc. Studios asks, will we ever get small Primarch models, do you think? And like with a small group of Honor Guard along with them in a theoretical box. Yeah, Luna Inc. I think that's really the only way I see it happening, because I really don't think they're going to put out resin kits for Legions Imperialis. Games Workshop is trying to get away from resin just in general. And so the only way I see them having it make logistical sense to produce special units for Legions Imperialis that are not universal is to make it an independent box. So if we see Primarchs, it's probably going to be you get a Primarch model and a little command escort squad to go on their base, and then you get some special units. So like for the Emperor's Children, maybe you'll get Phoenix Guard, and you might get Sun Killers, something like that. And that would make sense to me, because there's you can sell a whole box. It gives you the Primarch, it gives you special units, and it makes it easy to package and ship to the customer. And you don't have to have little blister packs that only 1/20th or 1/18th of the player base are going to buy. And then you've got to have all these different uh, you have all these different SKS or whatever they call them, the product codes. You have to keep track of it all. You just have one box, just like they did for the infantry boxes, right? You have the commander, you have all of these different specialties. Now that's not great because you don't get very much of each special unit, but maybe for the Legion specific boxes, because there's really only a couple of special units per Legion, like I guess for the Emperor's Children, you have the Phoenix Guard, the Palatine Blades, Sun Killers, and I guess the Chaos, the Noise Cultists, right? Or the Screamers, whatever they're called. So that would be 4, and out of 2 sprues, you could probably get, I don't know, 8 bases per, plus the Primarch. But you'd have to make different sprues because the Primarch would be on one and not the other, unless you wanted spare Primarchs. So I don't know. There's a challenge to dealing with that for sure. So yeah, I don't know. Mackie Note says, I mean, there are so many boxes already that adding 18 new boxes wouldn't be that surprising. So yeah, no, I agree with you, and that's kind of what I'm getting at, Mackie Notice. I think it makes sense to do one box per Legion. I don't think it makes sense that they would do like one blister pack for the Primarch, one for Sun Killers, one for Phoenix Guard, one for Palatine Blades, and so on. So that's how I see it happening. I think there's some logistical things to work out there, but that's really the only way I see it happening. Jim B687 says 9 of 12 scenarios in the rulebook say there are 28 inches between deployment, but if you count in centimeters, this is a different perspective. So you're just saying just play on a smaller table. 28 inches is what, 12, or 28 centimeters is about 12 inches, something like that. I mean, that is definitely a different perspective. Cole Billington says, had my first use of Marine superheroes yesterday. Fellblade, super heavies. Fellblade was underwhelming. Ascalon did well before getting popped. Yeah, I haven't really made a video about my my perception of the new units yet. I don't have my book. I guess I could just go on to Legion Builder and look at the statistics and make a review video, but I'm kind of waiting for the book first. But yeah, I did look at the Fellblade stats when I was kind of deciding which ones I wanted to buy, and I wasn't super pleased. And I can talk about that now, I guess, if you guys would like. Ascalon, that's the Flamer one, right? So again, I still don't. I mean, it looks cool, I guess, but I still don't understand the I still don't understand the purpose of putting a giant flamer on a super heavy tank. I think for the points, you'd want to have something that can handle. I mean, there's so many good ways of dealing with infantry already, right? Um, that I don't I don't see why you would spend so many points on a super heavy tank to do it for you. But if it did well for you, that's great. Maybe you can tell us a little bit more about how you used it. Jim B687 says for 1,200 points, you can have only one Warhound Titan. This is how percentage looks allied contingent. Yeah, unless you're playing a Collegia Titanica or a Mechanicum list, right? Then you can have, I guess, as many as you want. If I'm understanding you correctly. Cole Billington says, I think a resin limited edition run of all Primarchs in one box would make best business sense. I don't know about that. Maybe. I don't know because I mean again you're there's a lot of problems there. You're gonna have people complaining one, Primarchs aren't gonna be available. You have to, people don't like limited edition, even though they pay through the nose for it. They don't like that you're going to have to buy stuff that you don't want. Like, I don't want 18 Primarchs. I want the ones that I'm intending to play. So if I just want to play Emperor's Children and I just want to use Fulgrim, why do I need to pay $100 or whatever for this special limited edition box? So I don't know. I'm not trying to shoot down your idea, Cole Billington, but I think there are some issues that people would have with having to buy a limited edition resin box, especially if it was the same thing like with the special units. Like, I don't know. Jim B687 says, no, it says 28 inches. It changes into 28 centimeters. It says that in the rulebook? Yeah, I don't know. That's weird. Elko Cox says, hello, everyone. Hello. Good to have you on the stream. Thanks again for all your support over the past few months. I see you've got your red stripe, so I think that means you've been with us for 3 months now, so that's great. I really appreciate it. Cole Billington says Ascalon took out an objective building garrisoned and prevented it being reoccupied, although the Firestorm rules require some goodwill with the interpretation. Yeah, that's always been kind of a weird point in the game. I know at the start, there was a lot of contentious debate about how Firestorm worked. And like Mackie Notes said, I think it was discussed in the FAQ, and I think there's been a consensus. I don't ever use Firestorm, so I'm really not as well read on how it works as I should be, so I don't really want to speak to it too much here. Otherwise, I'd have to go get my rule book and make an on-the-spot interpretation. And unless you guys really want me to do that, I don't want to leave the stream just yet. Elko Cox says, jumping in, I think Primarchs would come through either a Loyalist-specific box of infantry or Legion-specific boxes of stuff. Yeah, I agree with that second bit, and that's what we were discussing just a minute ago, I think, before you joined the stream. I think Legion-specific boxes make the most sense because it seems like they're really trying to keep the number of product boxes down for Legions Imperialis, and that would be the way to do it, I think. Jim B687 says no, because Epic was first game made in centimeters, so I just point that it's small scale. Yeah, I mean it's definitely a change from Epic Armageddon, which I didn't play when I was um, when I was a kid growing up. I saw it, and something that I always wanted to try, but I think when I was sort of getting into Warhammer, they cut the development of the game, and so I never really had the chance to play it. And so now, however, 20 years later or whatever it is, maybe more, I kind of had the opportunity to do so finally. Who we got? Einsama3302 asks, how dense do you think a board should be terrain-wise? So I made a whole video about terrain. It's maybe a year old now, but I think it still holds up. I think there should be some variability. So I think that your games should vary in mission type and terrain, because that's going to prevent you and your opponent from tailoring your lists to a specific operational environment, which is what you want. You want to have, you don't want people to get into a rut, right? You want people to vary their lists and not necessarily to be able to depend on the same thing working at the same time. So you want to have variability. I think on average, the game, if you look at how the game describes, terrain in, I think it's the Great Slaughter, they have 3 different categories. They have like light, medium, and dense tables. And I think the dense is supposed to have 50% of the table covered, and then like 30, and then 15 or something like that. But you can look in that book, and that should tell you roughly what at least the game designers think. And what I do is I use the method in the main rule book, which says that each table quarter should have 1d3 plus 1 pieces of terrain. Now, the game doesn't necessarily specify how big those pieces of terrain are, but it does say that one large structure, which is 6 inches by 6 inches, should be counted as a piece of terrain. So I think if you're going to use a forest, it should be about 6 inches by 6 inches. Same thing with a large building. And then I think that should give you an idea of how much terrain you should have on the board. So if you have 1d3 plus 1, that's between 2 and 4 pieces of 6 by 6 terrain per table quarter. And that will be a significant amount of terrain. And then it varies. And then I think personally you should also have some scatter terrain. So you should have things like tank traps, minefields, barbed wire that make the open areas a little bit more interesting to play on. And I would say maybe 2 to 4 pieces of scatter terrain per table quarter would be a good balance as well. Also things like obstacles, so your vehicles can take cover behind them, and so on. Hopefully that answers your question, Einsama. Let me know if you have any others. Elko Cox says, although Legion-specific boxes would be quite costly for GW, but they made that content for HH. Yeah, it would be costly, and I'm not sure how much they would get on return, especially for some of the less popular Legions. Like if you made an Iron Hands box, maybe, or Salamanders or Raven Guard, how many people are going to buy that compared to the cost it's going to take? I mean, I think those plastic injection molds cost tens of thousands of dollars to make, so you really have to balance it. Let's see what else. Bildor1569 says, having gone back and played Epic Armageddon with the house rules for Horus Heresy, it just handles the game better than LI. Yeah, I've never played Epic Armageddon. I've seen some of the battle reports on Tabletop Standard. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if it seems better to me or worse. But maybe I should play a trial game on the channel using some of our miniatures, just to see what it's like. Because I've had quite a few people recommend that I try Epic Armageddon. One of the things that we talked about on the channel, I think in a comment just recently, was how much time it takes for melee to be handled. And it seems like that's an issue in Epic Armageddon as well. I don't know if anybody has any experience there. Bildor 1569 says the firefight and close combat rules are just straight better than CAF. Okay, so yeah, maybe. I remember seeing a... So what I do like about Epic Armageddon, sorry, I knocked the mic, is the allocation of wounds. I like that you allocate from nearest to farthest, and I just think that makes more sense. But when I watched that battle report from Tabletop Standard, I've watched several of their Armageddon battle reports. The close combat rules seem to take just as long. So I don't know. Maybe there's something functionally different about it. Jim B687 says, I went for Solar Auxilia because they are such World War I army and it's awesome. I want first build army with Solar Auxilia, Cyclops, remote bombs. Yeah, the Cyclops are a cool idea. I was thinking about using them like as a minefield, sort of in front of my infiltrated Solar Auxilia positions, but unfortunately they count as vehicles, so you can't infiltrate them in the Pioneer Company. I don't know how effective they are, really. I think I've used them once, and they were pretty underwhelming. But maybe I need to give them another try. Mackie Notes says, I think Epic 40k and Armageddon are superior rule sets to Legions Imperialis. That may be so. I've never played either one, so I will maybe have to try. Elko Cox says Epic Armageddon fails a bit on very big armies, 15,000 points, where LI still plays the same. I would say that's the only advantage LI has over EA. So 15,000 points is crazy. I think personally, I've never played a game that's more than 3,000 points. So maybe you can tell us a little bit more about your experience there, Elko Cox. Because I know Tabletop Standard, I think, did a 15,000 point game. Although it seems to me like they've done that before, and it was not like 15,000 points on a side. It was 7,500 points on a side, and all total it was 15,000, which isn't quite the same. Mackie Note says, wow, 15,000 points. That's a one-in-a-lifetime game. Yeah, it might take a lifetime with Legions Imperialis, I'll tell you. Jim B687 says, you know that this remote bombs go straight and hide behind corner waiting on hey, come closer. Yeah, I mean, that's certainly a way to use them. In my experience, I think the game tends to be over before I think something like that could really work. But maybe you're more tactically adept than I am. Elko Cox says 15,000 is exceptional for big narrative games. Yeah, I mean that would be a long game. Elko Cox says we've had a few of those in France in the last year. Wow, so more than one. I was just in France, so maybe the next time I'm over there, we can you can let me at least observe how you guys handle the 15,000k point games. Bildor says give it a go. I'm assuming that's in reference to trying Epic 40k or Epic Armageddon. Yeah, I will. I just need to, I guess, print out the rules and figure out how to handle it and get one of my opponents spun up. Copper State Gamer says, do you think the current mission selection in the rulebook works? I've been considering making a mission pack inspired by Flames of War. It has more asymmetric missions. That's a tough question, Copper State Gamer. And sudden death objectives. So just off the face of it, I'm not sure I like the idea of sudden death objectives. I know certainly some of my opponents who don't like progressive mission scoring would not like sudden death objectives. I think that's just more because I feel like, how do I put this? When the objective is single state, so when it's like sudden death or just kill everything, it really skews the focus of the game towards just killing rather than having some kind of fire and maneuver tactics. And that's why I personally like the progressive scoring, because I think it encourages more tactical play. I know it doesn't necessarily make sense in a logical way in terms of the narrative, but I think it promotes a better game experience. As far as the current mission selection in the rulebook goes, I think the missions for the most part are good. The retrieval mission is probably the one that I would say is not so good, because at least it was when I played. I haven't played it in a while, but that was back when you could march your infantry 3 times their movement. So the initial phase of the game was just who could get to the objective first, and then whoever was able to had a huge advantage because you were able to maneuver the objectives back towards your table edge. And it just wasn't very fun. But I think the other missions I haven't really noticed a big problem with, and I think the expanded missions in the campaign book so far have given some more flavor and made them a bit more interesting. Um, let's see, what else did you ask in your question? More asymmetric missions. So again, I think asymmetric missions are good. The problem is that the things that make asymmetric missions work in real life, like the advantages that the defender gets from holding a defensive position, are difficult to replicate in Legions Imperialis. And so asymmetric missions, I think, are tricky, especially for a game that is sort of coming from, I know Legions Imperialis isn't a competitive game, but it comes from that lineage, right? The mindset behind Warhammer is things should be roughly symmetrical. You have the same number of points, you deploy the same, and introducing asymmetric like numbers of points or terrain, I think can lead to a negative game experience for the person who the asymmetric nature of is on the wrong side. So it's a tough thing to do, I think. But the similar scale of Flames of War maybe means that the missions could be adaptable straight from Flames of War to Legions Imperialis. So maybe give it a try and see how it works. Jim B 687 says Titans have very poor strategical objective. Holding factors mean 0. Yeah, I mean, Titans are definitely, they are focused on just killing the enemy, right? So I would say, when you play Titans, you really have to focus on choosing the weapons that are going to destroy the enemy as quickly as possible before they can get to the objective. Bildor 1569, in all fairness, me saying Epic Armageddon is better is purely subjective. Well, of course, yeah. I mean, I totally understand and sympathize. I mean, everybody has their own perspective on what war games should be and what they enjoy. And I mean, I think we see that in historical games, particularly, where everybody has their own idea of what like World War II combat should be like, or Napoleonic. I think Napoleonic's is particularly egregious in that sense, where there seems to be more Napoleonic rule sets than Napoleonic players. So yeah, I don't think there's any need to be tentative about suggesting that Epic Armageddon is better than Legions Imperialis, because that's your player experience and your opinion. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think it'd be very hard to say that one war game is necessarily better than another. It just may focus on different attributes and characteristics of combat that different people appreciate and are searching for. Jim B 687 says 15K. Somebody used word extravaganza in White Dwarf. Yeah, I mean 15,000 points. I don't even know if I have 15,000 points of miniatures to play with. So that would be quite a project. Luna Inc. Studios asks, you can't march infantry anymore. You can, Luna Inc. Studios, you just can't march them 3 times their movement. They just march twice, just like every other unit now, which is a good change, because before, transports were basically not necessary, because the infantry could move almost faster without using a transport. Michael Cohout asks, do you think that knights are a viable unit right now? No, I don't. But that shouldn't stop you from playing them. but I don't think that they are. I think you get more bang for your buck from other units, and that's just because, like, we played in a game. We played a four-player game a few weeks ago, about a month ago, and one of the opponents on the other side had a knight army, and they're better than they were. They're still strong units. They're still dangerous, but they're not. I don't think they're still not on par with just a normal force. They can't hold objectives. They're really not. They're not dangerous enough. They can't split fire, so their weapon mix sort of hamstrings them. If they could split fire, they might be a little bit better. And then I really hate to talk about like meta stuff as far as Legions Imperialis goes. Like I really try to think about it from a narrative, tactical perspective. But a huge problem with knights is they just don't have enough activations. So you're gonna be outnumbered and you're gonna get outmaneuvered and outshot. And same thing with titans. Titans are very dangerous and they're very durable, or they can be. But you're going to get outmaneuvered. You're not going to be able to hold objectives, and so it's. I think they're cool and they're good as an addition to an army if it's something that you like. But I wouldn't go into a game with a knight army expecting to win. Mackie Note asks, what do you think about changing the rule of unit sizes? I feel like setting the size based on the category of unit instead of the actual size is bringing some inconsistencies, like a mastodon being pinned by one of the small knights. So you're talking about scale, Mackie Note? Because, yeah, I can see that. I mean, yeah, I think maybe one of the things I could think of is like the Cyclops is scale 2, so it can pin a vehicle, which maybe doesn't necessarily make sense. But then at the same time, if it couldn't pin a vehicle, it wouldn't really be that effective. So I don't know. I think it's just a challenging part of the game design. It is necessary, I think, to have something like that to represent the ability of units to pin, as they call it, other units in place. But I don't know what the solution is or would be if you didn't do something like that. I think there are maybe some inconsistencies, but overall, I think generally they do a pretty good job. A mastodon being pinned by one of the small knights. Yeah, I can kind of see that. But then if you decrease the size of the small knight, the scale of the small knight, then it's not going to be able to pin other knights. I don't know. Elko Cox says, regarding objectives, I like having multiple objectives to chase during a game. Makes you make interesting choices, and different lists can target different ones, keeping the game fresh. Yeah, I totally agree. And I think that's why secondary objectives also are pretty important. I didn't really used to worry too much about secondary objectives, especially when playing smaller games. But I think they are important because for the people who like end game scoring, they are scored at the end. So it gives you a chance to catch up if you've fallen behind on the objective scoring. And it gives you a reason to focus on different parts of your army and different forces just in general. So, yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, if it's just killing everything, then, which can be fun, just sometimes you just want to put everything on the table and just try to destroy the enemy. But first of all, that's rarely a military objective, right? You're really not trying to kill the enemy so much as you're trying to seize ground and get somewhere. And with the limited table space that we have, it's somewhat hard to replicate that. But having these progressive objectives kind of, I think, stands in good stead for that. And I think that's why I would why I prefer the progressive objectives. Elko Cox says, okay, it's the grand tournament format for EA. I'm not sure what you mean there. Are you talking about the multiple objectives, the 15,000 point game? Cole Billington says infantry is king in LI. Yeah, I mean, and in some sense that should be the way it is, right? Or that is the way it should be, because it's about seizing objectives. If it was just about killing things, then it'd be different. Infantry should have a place, and as Starship Troopers says, uh, you don't own something until you can put an 18-year-old with a rifle on top of it. So, or in our case, a 200-year-old genetically engineered super soldier. Cole Billington asks, when do you think stat cards will be out for the new journal units? That's a great question. I don't think it's going to be out until they release at least another Journal Strategia. Because, I mean, if we're honest, the card packs already are kind of padded out, right? You get multiple copies. You get formation cards, which maybe are useful, or maybe would have been useful 20 years ago when you didn't have electronic resources. I think the original 40K, you had little formation cards and you'd use them to add attachments to your army. So maybe that's just a callback to that, but I don't ever use them. I think it might be useful to have one card for each formation, then you could keep track of your casualties that way. And so that might be useful, but I don't necessarily think you have enough cards either. You do get multiples, but I don't think you necessarily have enough to do that. So anyway, the point I'm trying to make is that the card packs as they are right now are already kind of padded out. And so there's not going to be enough unless they maybe just release a whole carton pack for the whole box. So all of the Mechanicum, well, I guess there's no Mechanicum units, but all of the Astartes, all of the Solar Auxilia stuff, all whatever, just comes together. Then you might get enough. Again, you're going to have people complain that they don't want the Solar Auxilia, they don't want the Astartes, they don't want Mechanicum, they don't want whatever. But I think that would be the only way that they would publish a card pack, is just to pile everything together. But even then, it's going to be pretty slim. And so my guess is that they're going to wait until they've released at least one more Journal Strategia later on in the year, and then bundle everything together. Because I don't know if there's enough new stuff in this book to justify a whole new card pack. Elko Cox asks, what are your hobby objectives for 2026? So I've been thinking about that a lot. I mean, I was out of town for a couple weeks, kind of thinking about that, and thinking about plans for the channel. And I don't have as much time as I used to when I started this channel. I was pretty busy even back then, but now I'm more busy, so I'm gonna have to be really disciplined about what I spend my time on. So I do want to do. So I guess let me go back and let me answer your question directly. As far as my hobby objectives go, I want to complete some more terrain. I'd like to have at least one more set of terrain to play on. I mean, Hunter's been very generous. I play with him a lot. We use his terrain a lot, but I'd like to have some variety for the channel, and I'd like to, not ask him to be providing the terrain all the time. So I have my paper buildings. I'd like to kind of finish my forest set, maybe some roads, and get just another terrain set for the channel, because I think really the battle reports are probably where I need to be investing my effort. just because they get way more views and the amount of effort. Um, we spend about 5 hours on a battle report. I edit it, release it, and it gets lots of views. And other videos, do okay, but they take a roughly a similar amount of effort and they get maybe a fifth of the views. So I don't know what the path forward ahead for the channel is in that sense, but that's something I'm still kind of thinking over. As far as hobby objectives, as far as miniatures go, I want to put together a couple of full Astartes forces. So the first one that I want to do is going to be an Emperor's Children army. I've always liked the Emperor's Children. So that, I think, is the first goal. I'm still mulling over how I'm going to build it, and that's probably what I'm going to use. I'd like to make another video for the How to Fight and Win series. So I'm probably going to use my army building process and expand it a little bit and make a second video about that to expand the series. But I'm thinking about like a very sort of combined arms force for the Emperor's Children. I'd like to have their Solar Auxilia allies holding one of the objectives as a retain group, probably with some shadow swords and then some infantry, and then have some drop pods to drop down and occupy the forward objectives, and then have some, like an air assault, like with some Storm Eagles maybe, coming in, dropping assault marines to reinforce the forward objectives. Excuse me. And then maybe some Terminators in Spartans, like pushing up as part of a siege group to take and hold an enemy objective. So that, I think, some Spartans, some Terminators, tactical marines. I might see if I can print out some, or ask a friend to print me out some las cannon armed heavy weapons and come up with some special rules for some sun killers. And I think that would be fun. I think that would be a pretty easy conversion from the missile armed Astartes. Maybe just give them accurate or something and arm them with las cannons. So I think that makes sense for the Emperor's Children. Like, it's a very sort of complicated, right? You have all these different moving pieces executed to perfection. Very focused on firing and maneuver, plus some close assault with the Spartans. And that, air assault is very expensive because the gunships are so expensive. So I think that will probably take me to about 2,000 points. So I think that's the upper limit of what I'm going to be building to, just because we don't really play 3,000 points, if at all. And so I don't want to invest too much effort in miniatures that I'm never going to play. So there might be some armor attached to the Spartans, maybe some sabers screening ahead, something like that. I don't see myself using any dreadnoughts because I don't really think the Emperor's Children doesn't seem to fit well with Emperor's Children. So that's kind of the outline for that. The second army that I'm planning on is going to be a Shattered Legions force. So I'm thinking right now that I will use Raven Guard, excuse me, to infiltrate onto the forward objectives, and that'll be probably tactical marines or maybe heavy weapons marines with Terminators. I really like the Deliverers, I think they're called. They have that red ochre scheme. So I kind of want to paint some of those up. And so I'll infiltrate the heavy weapons into buildings or terrain at the frontal objectives, and then use the Terminators to kind of hold them. And then that'll be the Raven Guard, maybe some Xiphon fighters for air cover. The Iron Hands probably will be an armored force. I might use the Iconic formation, although I really don't think the Sakaran Omega is worth the points at all. So short ranged, and even when you get up close, like it's AP -2. It's pretty underwhelming. So I may just use some super heavies, and that'll be the punch for the Seas group moving up. And I don't necessarily want to use Spartans and Terminators again as part of the Seas group, because I'm already going to do that, I think, for the Emperor's Children. So I might do something else. I'm not sure what that will look like. And then I will use Salamanders as my retain groups. So they'll be in the back, and then they might be one group moving up to reinforce the Raven Guard that are occupying the objectives. I'm not sure what the composition of the Salamanders will look like. It might be supported by armor from the Iron Hands, but probably just some infantry, maybe some Terminators, or maybe some Dreadnoughts, maybe some Derodeos to provide air cover. And yeah, I haven't really gone too deep into it, but those are the two armies that I'm considering. I really have to. The main bottleneck right now is I have to find somebody to print me the infantry, because I'm not gonna buy 8 boxes of infantry to get enough Terminators and heavy weapons. And I don't want to use Mark 6 for Emperor's Children. I want to use Mark 4. I don't want to use Mark 6 for the Shattered Legions either. So yeah, so those are my two big plans, other than terrain. Luna Inc. Studios asks, any predictions for what we'll be getting this year? I predict that this year we'll get another faction. I've said this before, I think on stream and in a video. I think Games Workshop likes having 2 armies getting releases at a time. I don't think we're getting anything for the Solar Auxilia. We might get some more Baneblade variants, maybe. Especially now that Quake is actually a worthwhile rule. So we might get some more Baneblade variants, like with the Vulcan Mega Bolter, the Quake Cannon. Like, there's a ton, right? So we might see more of those. We will definitely get more Astartes releases. Probably just filling gaps, right? We'll get the Venator, the Sicaran Venator. I think we've already seen a picture of it in one of the books. We will... I know there was some speculation about whether we'll get another armor mark in an infantry box. I still am doubtful, but I think it was... Somebody said they are pictured in the new book. So that might be an indication. But at the same time, we also... I don't know. We also have an image of different... Like, the Lehman Russ is different, right, in the Talon book. It's like the new big heresy version and not the old model that we have in Legions Imperialis. So I'm not really sure if that's an indication of getting a new armor kit. But to go back to my original point, I think they like having 2 simultaneous releases, right? And we don't really have much for Solar Auxilia. We don't really have much left for Mechanicum, which means Astartes is all we've got. So to me, that's an indication that as we finish releasing the stuff for the Mechanicum and the Solar Auxilia, that we may see another army being released. We already have flyers for the Custodes from Aeronautica Imperialis, so I think it's a natural extension to have an army for them. What the order will be, I don't know. I think Sisters of Silence would be fun, but their main advantage, their main tactical use, right, is shutting down Psykers, which we really don't have at all. So until we have Psykers, then maybe they won't be released, which kind of leads me to think that maybe we'll see demons. But again, I mean, that seems kind of far-fetched. Because that seems like it would need a lot of design work, and it's also something that only one side can use. I guess only one side could use Custodes or Sisters of Silence either. So Yeah, I don't know. I think we will get a new faction. I, yeah, I don't know. That that would be my prediction is that we're going to get another faction. Which one it will be, I don't know. Mackie note. Let's see. Elko Cox says I would really like to see more terrain released for LI. Yeah, me too. I think there's a real fertile ground for that, and I am surprised that Games Workshop has not. Although I think it must be pretty expensive to produce. You know, they could release the military buildings. You could release because they have the Civitas Imperialis. You have the Militaris buildings. You have there's another category. You have fortifications you could release. You could release more of the tiles. There's a lot of stuff they could do. Mackie Note says, hey, that's exactly the list I'm working on right now. I think that was in reference to the Emperor's Children. So that's pretty cool, Mackie Note. Maybe you could tell us a little bit more about your list. Cole Billington says, a query that came up in my game, does an indirect artillery barrage against a building still get a +1 to hit the building? I mean, I could go get my rule book and take a look, Cole Billington, but that might be a better question for the community stream so that I can actually look at it in more depth and not give you an off-the-cuff answer. It is open to the public. You don't have to be a channel member. If you go to the there should be a post in the community tab, and if you just scroll down until you see community show entries open, there should be a link where you can submit a Q&A. And if you do that, I'll be sure to answer that question for the community show, which should be released next week on Monday. Just off the cuff, though, I would probably say that, yes, you should still get a +1 to hit. Johns D3341 says, my plan for Shattered Legions is to have the Salamanders be using the new Saturnine stuff. I mean, that totally makes sense, Johns. I mean, they're tough as nails, right? And putting them in even tougher stuff makes perfect sense, and especially since Vulcan is supposed to have invented or refined those designs. Makes total sense. As I said in my video, I'm not a super big fan of the Saturnine design, so I probably won't use them myself. I haven't had a chance to look at the rules either up to this point, so let me know what your intended use for those will be. Are they just going to sit in the back line and hold an objective, or are you going to push them up the middle and seize? Luna Inc. Studios says, I really want a Xenos like orcs or demons to be released. I do too. I think that would be a lot of fun. I think having some great Crusade stuff would be great. Eldar, I mean, I've always liked the whole elf aesthetic. I guess since when I was a kid and I read, the Lord of the Rings and read about, I never read the Silmarillion, but I read about the stories in it. And Jenny Dolphin's art really was very formative because she was big into the Silmarillion. And she did a lot of really beautiful watercolor work inspired by the Silmarillion. And the elves struggle against Morgoth and how the humans sort of assisted and did not assist in that struggle really captured my imagination. And so I've always sort of had a soft spot, sympathetic part of me for elves and Eldar in particular. I've always really liked. So having them in the game I would really like that. Do I think it's going to happen? Not really. No, at least not for a long time. What else we got? Demons, I do think I think will happen eventually. I don't know when though. Johns D says the new journal does have Mark III infantry in it. Yeah, so that could be a clue. I don't know. I would be surprised unless they package it as part of a new set of heavy weapons. But again, what else are they going to include in there? Are they going to redo everything? Are you going to have a Mark III heavy weapons kit for like a garrison kit, like for guys in Mark III running rapiers? I don't see that happening. Elko Cox says, with the expansion of Black Library into the Scouring, I think LI could go there by 2027, bringing Orcs and Eldar to the fray. In 2026, we might get to the Siege of Terra. I think personally, you're being pretty optimistic, Elko Cox, and I don't mean that. I don't mean that in a bad way, but I once they get to the Siege of Terra, that's like the end of the game, right? Um, because that's always sort of hanging over our head. Like, when is the Siege of Terra going to be? They're going to need to have a that's going to be a big event. Like, they don't even have a Siege of Terra for the Horus Heresy. Like, they never released it for Black Books, right? So that's like the end game for Legions Imperialis. You're going to need to have a campaign system. You're going to need to have all of these miniatures in place. You need to have demons, custodes. Um, all of this stuff is going to have to be released and mature. You're going to have a campaign system. I mean, there's all of this stuff that needs to be in place for the Siege of Terra. And then the problem is, once you release that, there's going to be this huge, I don't know what the right word is, but there's going to be almost a post, like a depression, right? Because it's been building up and building up and building up, all this anticipation, and then now it's done. So I think Games Workshop is going to be very reluctant to release a Siege of Terra book. But I could be wrong. Cole Billington says, I predict the two new factions will be Custodes, Sisters, and Demons. Yeah, I think you're right, Cole Billington. I think there will be something along those lines within the next year or so. Mackie Note says, basically a large heavy assault spearhead formation and an aerial assault formation. Yeah, so it sounds like exactly what I was discussing. Yeah, so that's really cool. So hopefully, as you get that painted, you can, and you play with it, you can give us some information about your tactics and how your games go. And if you want to send some photos in, make sure and your army list and your plan, for sure, make sure to do that for the community show when you have a chance, because I'd like to see your army list and your miniatures too. Elko Cox says, gotta go. Thanks for the stream. Cheers and happy end of year celebrations. Happy end of year celebrations to you too, Elko Cox. Thanks for stopping by. Good talking with you. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday. So let's see. So we've got about 15 people watching. That's great. Thanks everybody for joining us. I figure we'll stream for, it's kind of dying down a little bit. So I figure we'll stream for another 10 minutes, which is about what I'd planned. I'm happy to answer any more questions or just ramble on about whatever. And then we'll probably end around 11 or 11 o'clock for me. Mackie Note says, will do. I have about 3/4 of it already painted. Well, God bless. That's that's impressive. That's great. Yeah, I need to get to work on my stuff too. I'm a little behind. Are you building it for 3,000 points, or what size army are we looking at? One of the things that I always had trouble with when I was doing my Emperor's Children for large-scale Horus Heresy was I could never decide what color I wanted my Emperor's Children. I went through, like, I guess that's true to form for an Emperor's Children player, but I could never get the shade of purple right. So I'm gonna have to. Hey, Beard, how's it going, man? Good to see you. Thanks for stopping by. Let's see. Copper State Gamer says, what campaign would you like to see covered in a journal next? That is a great question. I grew up with the Horus Heresy, with the Istvan campaigns, and that was what left the strongest impression on me. I'd never really read the other major campaigns, like for the Blood Angels with is it Cygnus? Or the Ultramarines at Calth. So that doesn't really have a big hold on me. And then, of course, right, the Siege of Terra. But we already talked significantly for a while about why I don't think that's going to be released for a while. I could see them doing Cygnus because, you know, that would be an easy lead into demons, right? That would be an easy lead into demons. That would be, you know, something that would probably, I think it's already been detailed pretty significantly in the Black Books, so it wouldn't necessarily be a heavy lift design-wise. So that's something that I could see. That's not really answering your question, though. I mean, what I would like to see, I like the Istvan, the original, I think it's Istvan 5, right? I like that campaign where it's, you know, you're going in against some traders, and then you have the local forces, and then you have the betrayal, and the campaign there with the Emperor's Children and the World Eaters and the Death Guard all fighting each other. But of course, that limits its appeal, right? So there's all kinds of considerations that you have to make. That's what I would enjoy. I don't think that's going to happen. Just because it's not really appealing to a lot of people, right? It's appealing to people who play those 3 legions. We've already got Talon. We've got Istvan coming up. We've got, I forget the name of the book on the Great Slaughter, or the name of the planet on the Great Slaughter. But that was a good one. I really don't have a particular campaign that I'm attached to. Like I said, I haven't, honestly, I've not read all of the Horse Heresy books. I've read the first 3 or 4, and then I've read a couple of the Siege of Terra books, and that's about it. So I'm not super tied to any particular campaign. What I care about is that they release a campaign book that has a good narrative, that's interesting, that makes tactical sense, that has good maps, that has, you know, operational graphics, that has interesting events and characters, and that has good art, and that has interesting situations and terrain, and maybe even political context. And that's why I think I liked the Great Slaughter book so much. If they release a book like that, I will enjoy it whatever campaign it is, because that's the great thing about the Horse Heresy is really, and maybe one of its problems is it's so big, right? I mean, you have a galactic-sized conflict, and even a planetary conflict is too much to cover in a single book, right? So you're talking about, and you're not going to have all of the legions together all at once, and so that makes it difficult to write a campaign book that appeals to everybody. So, yeah, those things are what I'm looking for out of a campaign book, not necessarily one particular thing that I find appealing, or one campaign that I find appealing. Hopefully that answers your question, Copper State Gamer. I know that maybe was kind of rambling. Mackie Note says, for the event I told you last stream, by the end of January, the list is 2,000 points. Okay, yeah, so 3/4. Yeah, I mean that seems definitely doable. I mean, you got a month to paint, about 500 points. So yeah, that's impressive. I'm definitely gonna have to get my act together and get started painting. I'm not sure what I'm gonna do about the Napoleonics. It's something I've wanted to do for a long time. This is going back to the hobby discussion, I guess. Something I've been wanting to do for a long time, but I just don't know if there's enough people interested, and I don't know if it's really worth, I don't know how many people are going to watch battle reports for Napoleonics on the channel. And, I hate to be the guy chasing views, but like I said before, I really have to be pretty ruthless about what I spend my hobby time on. And so if Legions Imperialis is the focus of the channel, and that's never going to change. So that's really where I have to focus my energy. And if I'm spending a lot of time and money and effort on a game that either people don't want to watch and people in my local area don't want to play, that may not be the wisest thing to do. So I don't know. As always, I'm open to hearing feedback from you guys about what you want to see on the channel. just because that helps me focus my efforts. So we got about 5 more minutes. If anybody has any more questions, I'm happy to answer. And I guess what I can do now is maybe plug the community show, which we're gonna do next week, is when I'm gonna produce it. So if you have any questions, if you have any work in progress photos, if you have a battle plan or an army list that you'd like to submit to the channel to have me review and give feedback on, I'm happy to do so as part of the community show. It's going to be a pre-recorded video. So over next weekend, I am going to look through all of the entries. I'll put them all together in, the normal sort of PowerPoint style video that I make. And we'll discuss, the work in progress photos. We'll discuss your questions. If you have, like, we had a question about a rules interpretation, which Cole Billington left in the chat just a few minutes ago. And so that kind of thing, I'm happy to, I really encourage you to submit, and I'm happy to do my best to answer. Obviously, it's not official, but I'll go through my thought process of how I would handle it in one of my games. I'm also happy to look at army lists. So if you just type it up and format it cleanly and submit it through the link, and I'll take a look at it and give my thoughts during the community show as well after I've considered it. And then the battle plan as well, that's where you tell me how you're going to use your miniatures in your army list and how you're going to go about winning the game. And I'll just give my own feedback and thoughts about it. And so again, those can be found through the links there should be a post in the community tab, and it should be, it should have the billboard like I've been doing, and it should say community show entries open. And if you go to that post, there should be links. There's a separate link for each entry. So Q&A, work in progress photos, army lists, and battle plan. And if you follow that link, you'll go to a Google form and you can submit your document or your photo or your question. And when it comes time this weekend, I'll look through all of the entries and I'll put the show together. So I definitely encourage everybody to, if you're interested in participating, I definitely encourage you to try that out. I think I've got it set up on Google Forms where it's pretty easy to do. And so that should be a good, I think it'll handle it pretty well. If you're curious about what the community show is going to be like, we have already done one on the channel, I think at the end of October, something like that. If you look through the videos on the channel, you'll find it no problem, and you can kind of see what the format will be like. So I think that about wraps it up, guys. We've got 11 people still. We had, I think, 15 people earlier, so that's really good. I appreciate everybody logging in and joining me for the stream, especially our channel members who've been supporting the channel financially. I really appreciate all of the support, guys. And we had Elko Cox, and we also had Copper State Gamer. I'm not sure if Copper State Gamer is still here, but he's got his black stripe, so I think he's been a member for about a month now, maybe 2 months. So just a big shout out to them. I really appreciate the help, guys, and the support. Thanks to everybody who joined the channel today and asked questions and participated in the stream. And I hope you all enjoy the rest of your Sunday, and I'll see you at the next stream. Take care.